Hello and welcome back to my channel. I'm really encouraged by the viewership and the activity in the comment section of the previous video I did on Diane Schuler. It's really motivating seeing so many people talking about a video I made. It's really cool. Thank you to everyone who was a part of that. At the time I'm writing this, my second video is over 50,000 views, over 700 comments, and we have made it to our first 1,000 subscribers. You first 1,000 subscribers are the OGs of this channel. Hopefully we will grow larger and larger. So, the first case we covered was a pretty straightforward solved case. The second one is considered solved, but has some mysterious elements to it. In this third case, we're diving fully into the world of unsolved cases, as we will go over the disappearance of Bryce Laspisa. Unsolved cases will likely be the majority of what is covered on this channel, as those are the cases that typically interest me the most, and you never know, we could actually help in finding some answers towards solving one of them. Some of you are likely already familiar with this case, as it's a fairly well-known true crime case. I find it very similar to such cases like Maura Murray or Brandon Lawson. It's one of those cases where no matter which theory you go with, there's going to be some holes and some questions that are left unanswered. So let's get to it. This is the mysterious case of Bryce Laspisa. Bryce Laspisa was born April 30th, 1994, in Naperville, Illinois, a western suburb of Chicago. His parents were Karen and Michael Laspisa. Karen was his birth mother, and Michael adopted him when Bryce was a baby. He was an only child. Bryce attended Kingsley Elementary School, Lincoln Junior High School, and graduated from Naperville Central High School in 2012. Bryce was known to be quite popular amongst his high school and had a lot of friends growing up. He was good-looking, a talented artist, got good grades, and he played football and baseball. He was 5'11" and 170 pounds. It was said Bryce could always light up a room and make people smile. Not long after graduating high school, Bryce's parents retired, and the trio moved to Laguna Niguel, California, a city in Orange County well known for its famous Laguna Beach. Bryce then enrolled in Sierra Community College in Rocklin, California, to study graphic and industrial design. It was 7 hours away from his parents' house in Laguna Niguel. He made a lot of friends quickly and seemed to be doing well at first. Bryce stayed in the college dorm with a roommate named Nick Cavina during his freshman year, but due to his excessive drinking and partying, he was kicked out of the dorm on campus. Nick said that Bryce partied harder than most students, and he wasn't surprised when he heard Bryce had disappeared. He was quoted saying, "I expected nothing good could come from the path he was on." Nick said their friendship ended on not the best of terms when Bryce was evicted from the dorm, but he had no ill will towards him. After Bryce was evicted from the on-campus dorm, he moved into an apartment with his new roommate Sean Dixon. They quickly became good friends. Bryce also began dating a woman he met at the college named Kim Sly. Bryce managed to make it through freshman year and spent the summer with his parents in Laguna Niguel. I believe Bryce arrived back in Rocklin about a week before his sophomore year was set to begin, which was on August 19th, 2013. There is so much conflicting information online about when exactly Bryce returned to Rocklin, and some sources claim Bryce lived in Chico. What I can confirm is that classes did begin August 19th, 2013. Bryce lived in Rocklin, and Kim Sly lived in Chico about an hour and a half north. Friends close to Bryce began to notice a shift in his behavior. They had seen signs during his freshman year, but when Bryce came back from summer break, he seemed to be drinking a lot more. He would go through 2/5 of vodka in a single weekend. In addition to drinking, Bryce also began taking a drug called Vyvanse, commonly prescribed for ADHD. Bryce said the reason he first tried it was because he wanted to stay up all night and play video games. Bryce's roommate Sean said that at first Bryce said he just tried it as a one-time thing to stay up all night gaming. But as what happens so often, he tried it again and then again and again and again and got to the point where he was using it regularly. Nobody tries drugs thinking they're going to become an addict and lose everything they have. Whenever somebody tries drugs, it's always just a one-time thing and they just want to try it, and sometimes that's what happens. But once you have tried that drug, it's going to alter your brain chemistry and your decision-making is going to be affected. Maybe you were just planning on trying the drug and using it one time. Then a few days go by, and you have something else to do that you need some extra energy for, or you want to stay up longer, and you take it again. Then before long you're taking it every day, and you need it just to get through the day. Vyvanse is a drug used to treat ADHD, or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. It's prescribed because it helps people who have ADHD focus and pay attention better. It's similar to other stimulant drugs like Adderall or Ritalin. There are some drugs that are downers that can make you sleepy or feel very relaxed. Stimulant drugs like Vyvanse are the opposite. Stimulants speed you up. They make it difficult to fall asleep and give you lots of energy. A lot of long-haul truck drivers take stimulants because it helps them stay awake while driving on the roads all night long. We will discuss this more later in the video. Our timeline of the events surrounding the disappearance begins on Monday, August 26, 2013. Some sources say Bryce had already been in classes for 2 weeks prior to the disappearance, and other sources claim August 26th was his first day of classes. Classes for the school year began on August 19th, so it's likely he was starting his second week of classes. On August 26th, Bryce attended his speech and web design classes, and then called his mom Karen. Karen reported that everything seemed perfectly fine, and Bryce seemed totally normal. Later that day, she receives a photo from Bryce posing with a brand new copy of Madden, an NFL game for his Xbox. On August 27th, people close to Bryce began to notice he was acting kind of strange. Bryce gave his roommate Sean 2 of his most prized possessions: his Xbox and a pair of diamond earrings that his mom had given him. Bryce's girlfriend Kim really began to notice Bryce's odd behavior and asked him if everything was okay. This is when Bryce told her that he had been taking Vyvanse that was not prescribed by a doctor. Sometime between that day and the next, Bryce broke up with Kim over text saying, "You would be better off without me." Kim responded, "Are you breaking up with me?" Bryce replied, "Yes." Bryce then texted Sean, "I love you, bro. Seriously. You are the best person I've ever met. You saved my soul." Sean responded with, "I love you too, man. You have an amazing life, full of love and blessings. Don't waste that. You have too many people who love you, Bryce." At some point throughout the day, Sean became worried about Bryce. He had just given him his most prized possessions. He sent that worrisome text to him, and his alcohol and Vyvanse usage was ever increasing. Sean called Bryce's mom and told her that he was worried about Bryce. The next day, on Wednesday, August 28th, Kim wasn't just going to let Bryce end their relationship of 1 year over text, and demanded Bryce come to her apartment in Chico and confront her face to face. Bryce arrived at Kim's apartment in Chico sometime around 10 p.m. that night. Bryce once again tried to end the relationship. Kim could tell something was seriously off with Bryce, and she took his keys and said he wasn't in the right state of mind to drive. Bryce then called his mom and told her Kim wouldn't give him his car keys. Bryce put Kim on the phone, who explained to his mom her concerns that Bryce had been drinking and taking Vyvanse and didn't seem in his right state of mind, and she didn't feel like he should be driving. Bryce got on the phone and spoke with his mom. He told her he was fine and had just broken up with Kim. He said Kim was acting this way because she was upset that he had broken up with her. Karen said she was going to get on the next plane to Rockland so she could see Bryce the next day. Bryce told her not to. He said he had a lot they needed to talk about, and he wanted her to wait until they had a talk before she made any plans to fly out. Karen told Kim to give Bryce his keys back and made Bryce promise to call her in the morning. She told Bryce to drive straight home to his apartment in Rockland and go to bed. Bryce leaves Kim's apartment around 11:30 p.m. How odd is it that in the last day, the two people closest to Bryce in his life at college have spoken to his mom telling her something isn't right with him? Just think, when you were around that age, what would it have taken for you to actually call your friend's mom and tell them you were worried about them? It would have to be pretty bad, right? I also find it weird that Bryce's mom was ready to take a plane to go see him the next day, but then just told Kim to give him back the keys because he had a lot to talk to her about. Unfortunately, we will never find out what it was that Bryce had to talk to his parents about. When Karen woke up the next day, August 29th, she saw that she had a missed call from Bryce at 1 a.m. There seems to be some discrepancy about whether or not this call was answered, and I am confident that it was a missed call, and they didn't speak at this time. Karen assumed Bryce was just calling her to let her know he made it home safely. She would find out later that cell towers placed him 1 hour south of his apartment in an isolated area near the time he made the call. At 11 a.m., Bryce's parents listened to a voicemail they received from their auto insurance company, State Farm. They found out that their roadside assistance plan was used at 9 o'clock in the morning in Buttonwillow. Buttonwillow is a very small town in California, basically just known for having a truck stop. They immediately tried calling Bryce, but he didn't answer. They called his roommate Sean, who told them Bryce never made it home last night. They had given Bryce a credit card to use, so they checked their credit card records and found out that Bryce had spent $20 to buy gas at Castro Tire and Truck Wash in Buttonwillow. Buttonwillow was located off Interstate 5, about halfway between Bryce's apartment in Rockland and his parents' house in Laguna Niguel. It was about 4.5 hours from Rockland and about 3 hours from his parents' house. They tried calling Bryce several more times, but he wasn't answering the phone. Bryce's parents weren't expecting him to come back to the family home in Laguna Niguel. The last time Karen had spoken to Bryce, she had told him to go straight home and go to bed and expected Bryce to do that. Given that Bryce was about halfway between Rockland and Laguna Niguel, they figured Bryce must be coming back to their home. Buttonwillow is about 3 hours away from Laguna Niguel, so once noon came with no sign of Bryce, they really started to get worried. Karen called Castro Tire and Truck Wash, which is the place that State Farm used for Bryce's roadside assistance call. Karen spoke to a man who worked there named Christian and found out that Bryce had run out of gas. Christian had brought him 3 gallons of gas around 9 a.m. Now some people question why Bryce didn't call for gas until 9 a.m. when Buttonwillow was only about 5 hours away from Kim's apartment in Chico. During my research, I saw a lot of people speculating about this missed time. If Bryce left Kim's apartment at 11:30 p.m., and called for gas at 9 a.m., there are a few hours missing. If you look up Castro Tire and Truck Wash, you will see they open at 8 a.m. So, it is most likely that Bryce ran out of gas sometime during the middle of the night and waited until the morning for the gas station to open. Maybe he even napped for a little bit. So, I don't really think there is any missing unexplained time here. Christian offers to go back to the spot where he last saw Bryce to see if he's still in the area. Karen tells him don't bother, and that Bryce will likely be home soon, and he's probably not answering because he's driving. Christian tells her he doesn't mind doing it, and he's going to go check anyway. Christian finds Bryce sitting in the same spot with his eyes looking a little red. Christian calls Bryce's mom and tells her he's still sitting there and puts Bryce on the phone. Karen tells Bryce to get gas and drive the 3 hours to their house, and they would talk when he gets there. Bryce fills his car with gas at the local station. They now expect Bryce to be home by 3 p.m. 3 p.m. comes and goes, and Karen starts trying to call Bryce again and gets no answer. His parents were really starting to get worried now. By 6 p.m. they were freaking out and decided to file a police report with the Orange County Sheriff's Office. They haven't heard from Bryce for about 6 hours at this point. The police had AT&T ping Bryce's phone and find him about 7 or 8 miles away from the spot he was in 6 hours prior, sitting in a hotel parking lot. They ask Bryce why he's just been sitting in his car all day and let him know his parents are very worried about him and urge him to give them a call. Bryce tells them he's just blowing off some steam. Some sources say he told the officers he was waiting to meet a friend. The police had Bryce perform a sobriety test, and Bryce gave them no indications he was intoxicated. They then asked Bryce if they could search his 2003 beige Toyota Highlander. Bryce consents. The police search the car and find nothing. The police urge Bryce to call his parents, but he seems very reluctant to do so. They dial Karen on the phone and put the phone in Bryce's hand. Bryce's mom asks Bryce what is going on. Bryce tells her he's putting things back in his car. Karen asks Bryce what he's been doing all day, and he says nothing. Karen didn't want to be too hard on Bryce at the time. She just wanted him to get home, and they would figure things out once he was safe at home. She didn't want to say anything that might cause him to take any longer. She tells Bryce to get some food and drive home. She speaks to the police, and they tell her that Bryce seems perfectly fine, and they don't have any reason to think he shouldn't be driving. Sometime later, Christian sees he has a missed call from Karen, so he returns her call. Karen tells him that the police talked to Bryce, and he should be on his way home. Christian tells Karen he is going to go check and make sure Bryce has left. Christian finds Bryce still in the same location. Christian tells Bryce he needs to go home, and he is freaking his parents out. Christian tells him to start driving towards the highway and follows behind him. Christian follows Bryce down Interstate 5 for about 10 miles before turning around. Christian called Bryce's mom and let her know that Bryce is currently driving towards them and has officially finally left Buttonwillow. It's now been about 24 hours since Bryce left Kim's the night before. Bryce had likely spent about 18 hours in Buttonwillow at this point. He had likely been awake at this point for close to 40 hours, if he had stayed awake the whole time. Reminder, he had been abusing Vyvanse, so it is probable he had not slept. Couple of hours, Bryce and his parents exchanged multiple phone calls. At 1:50 a.m. his parents ask him where he is, and he says he isn't sure. They ask him what do the street signs say, and he says he doesn't see any. They ask him if there are any landmarks in the area, and he says he doesn't see anything. Bryce tells them his GPS says he will be home at 3:25 a.m. At 2:09 a.m. Bryce called Karen and told her that he was really tired and needed to sleep. They really want Bryce home as soon as possible, but they realize it could be dangerous for Bryce to be driving after being awake for so long, so his parents agree. Bryce should pull over at a rest stop and take a nap and then get back on the road. The next morning comes, and the Laspisa's doorbell rings, and they race to the door thinking Bryce is finally home. When they open the door to their shock and horror, they see a state trooper standing in front of them. The state trooper asks them do they own a 2003 beige Toyota Highlander. They told him their son was driving that car. The officer informed the Laspisas that at 5:30 this morning the vehicle had been found overturned and abandoned at Castaic Lake off an access road to a state recreation area. He said the car had been found on its side at the bottom of a 25-foot embankment at the base of a steep hill, lying with the passenger's side on the ground. The front bumper made impact with the ground first, and then the car rolled over onto its side. The rear window of the car had been broken from the inside. They believed Bryce was inside the vehicle at the time of the crash, and that Bryce had kicked out the window and climbed out. His laptop and cell phone were found inside the vehicle. His duffel bag and wallet were found outside the car near the rear window. I believe the bag was found empty. His parents' address was programmed into the GPS of his phone. They found only 2 drops of Bryce's blood inside the car. 1 drop was found on the passenger's side headrest, and the other in the back seat, which suggested that Bryce likely wasn't seriously injured, though there was the possibility of internal injuries or possibly a head injury. An examination of the scene suggested that Bryce drove off Lake Hughes Road into a rest area next to a cell tower. The cell tower was at the top of an embankment and Main Ramp Road was at the bottom. Bryce drove off Lake Hughes Road into the service area and went down the embankment and rolled his vehicle landing with the passenger's side on the ground. Bryce then kicked out the rear window and escaped the vehicle and left the scene. Upon investigating the tire tracks as well as large rocks that had been kicked up in the area, police were able to assume that while going down the embankment, Bryce had accelerated and sped up instead of hitting the brakes. This suggested to investigators that Bryce may have been trying to take his own life by driving his car into Castaic Lake, but the vehicle flipped before it could reach the lake. Surveillance cameras recorded Bryce traveling up Lake Hughes Road at 2:25 a.m., just 16 minutes after he had spoken to his mom on the phone and told her he was going to pull over somewhere to take a nap. He was seen again on camera traveling back up Lake Hughes Road 2 hours later at 4:29 a.m., 1 hour before the crash was discovered, headed in the same direction as before, indicating that he drove down Lake Hughes Road and then exited onto the main road and circled back to travel the exact same way he did 2 hours prior. To me, this indicates he was driving down that road looking for a good spot to drive his car into the lake. I believe he saw a gap in the guardrail where the pull-off was for the cell tower and thought that might be a good spot to do it. Then he drove along for a while, possibly looking for a better spot. After a couple of hours, he decided that it was the spot he was going to do it and returned. The wrecked car was discovered at 5:30 a.m., and there was a massive search the next few days involving divers, sniffer dogs, ATVs, horses, helicopters, and hundreds of people. On the 9th day, they brought in bloodhounds to help search. The dog walked around the lake, across the dam, and down to a truck stop, which I believe to be the Pilot Travel Center, as it's the only truck stop in the area I can find. They used a second sniffer dog which repeated the results indicating Bryce likely escaped the crash, and then walked to the truck stop and disappeared from there. The ground search focused on Government Cove, near the main boat launch on the upper lake. On September 4th, 5 days later, a jogger from the area called 911 to report a brush fire about 3 miles away from where Bryce's car was found. When firefighters arrived, they discovered the cause of the fire to be a burning body. Police conducted a large-scale investigation of the area consisting of hundreds of volunteers, helicopters, divers, and ATVs. No sign of Bryce would ever turn up. The man's name was Lamondre Dion Miles, age 35, who lived in a neighborhood south of Los Angeles. Miles was shot multiple times in the torso in the city of Hawthorne and was dead before his body was dumped in the Castaic area and lit on fire. Officials said the body was too badly burned to be immediately recognizable. Authorities said 23-year-old Joanna Amezcua and 22-year-old brother Luis Amezcua were charged by prosecutors with 1 count each of murder in the case. Bail was set at $1 million each. Joanna's boyfriend, Javier Vega, aged 33, was also charged with being an accessory to murder. His bail was set at $575,000. Authorities said the murder stemmed from a dispute over money, but they didn't elaborate. After a few weeks, the search for Bryce Laspisa was called off. Investigators said there is no evidence to suggest that foul play was involved or that Bryce died of suicide. Bryce's roommate Sean said in his police interview he wasn't expecting Bryce to come home that night, but he didn't think Bryce was planning on leaving forever. Sean said, "I think that he's trying to find himself right now. He doesn't want to be found. He left like he was only grabbing essentials. He left everything else, like he still has most of his clothes here. His TV is still here. He told us he would come back on Labor Day, which was September 2nd. Investigators believed Bryce willingly walked away from his life, which is a conclusion cops absolutely love to jump to when they don't have enough leads to thoroughly investigate a case. If you listen to detectives, you would think it's totally common for people to wreck their car and then walk away leaving everything behind and start a new life somewhere else and never speak to their friends or family again. Happens all the time. Bryce's family unsurprisingly doesn't agree with that assessment and states they were very close, and there is no way Bryce would ever leave them without contact for so many years. His parents have continued searching for him for years now. Feeling like the police weren't doing enough, they hired a private investigator named Denise. In 2015, Denise hired a sonar boat and searched Castaic Lake for 2 12-hour days, but nothing was found. Sonar uses sound waves to generate an image of the bottom of the lake. Denise thinks that if Bryce was suicidal, he may have gone into deep water in Government Cove, which is part of the lake near the crash site. All of Bryce's social media have maintained the same passwords in hopes he will log on one day and make a post. Sadly, until this day in 2025, Bryce has never been found. Alright, so that wraps up the timeline. Bryce has now been missing for over 12 years at the time I'm making this video. It's now time to start going over the theories. As previously mentioned, according to investigators, including the lead detective on the case, Bob Martindale, it's most likely Bryce got a ride with one of the truck drivers at the truck stop and executed this entire plan so he could run away and start a new life. That typically seems to be the conclusion cops come to when they have a case like this, and I don't like it at all. It just makes no sense to me why someone who is close to their family, has lots of friends, is going to college, and seemingly doing well in life, would just out of the blue fake their disappearance. And then what? He got fake documents made and stole someone's social security number, and is living a new life under a false identity? I just don't buy it. I think that's a cop-out. No pun intended. It seems like whenever you have one of these types of cases, the cops do everything they can to avoid investigating. In this case, it seems as though they did a thorough investigation fairly immediately and responded accordingly. But in a lot of cases like this, you will see the cops dragging their feet, telling the family to come back after the person has been missing for a certain length of time, usually 24 to 48 hours. Then they will say things like they're an adult, they have every right to walk away and start a new life. Even if that's what Bryce did, I'm sure somebody would have recognized and reported him by now. There are some reports I came across that claim the police changed his status to voluntarily missing, which would indicate they did find Bryce and he told them he just wanted to be left alone, but I think that's misinformation. There is nothing I can find that suggests the case is not still active. He is still listed as a missing person, or is he? I have come across one thing I find quite odd. When I go to NamUs, the missing persons database, and I type in Bryce Laspisa, it comes back no results. However, when I search other famous missing persons, they all come back with results. Even Brandon Lawson, whose remains have now been found. Why not Bryce? He does, however, appear in the California missing persons database. So make of that what you will. His parents are still searching for him, and I am pretty sure if they did locate him, they would at least let his parents know he was safe and alive somewhere and just wanted to be left alone. It would be really weird for the police to hide that information and just let everyone think this guy is still missing or dead. If Bryce is still out there, he is likely living a transient existence as there has been no activity on his social security number, bank accounts, credit cards, or passport. Bryce's parents think due to his excess use of Vyvanse, Bryce suffered a psychotic break and possibly suffered head trauma during the crash, and then wandered off over to the truck stop and got a ride with a truck driver and is wandering around not knowing who he is, suffering from either a fugue state or retrograde amnesia. When someone is in a fugue state, it is characterized by sudden, unexpected travel or wandering, along with the inability to recall one's past or identity. They may have no memory of their previous life or identity during the episode, though there is no recorded evidence of a fugue state lasting this long. Retrograde amnesia is a type of memory loss where individuals struggle to recall events of information that occurred before the onset of amnesia. This memory loss can range from a few moments to years and can be temporary or permanent. It's often associated with damage to brain areas involved in memory consolidation, such as the hippocampus or temporal lobes. I have seen some people speculate that Bryce could have been homosexual. When he was at Kim's house and spoke with his mom on the phone, he told her not to fly out because he had a lot he needed to talk to her about. Could it be possible Bryce was planning on coming out to his parents? Could the reason he was sitting around for so long be that he was trying to build up the courage to tell them? One interesting fact I noted during my investigation is that Bryce's girlfriend Kim is now married to a woman. I'm not sure what exactly to make of that, if anything. The thought did pop into my head, what if Bryce and Kim weren't in a real relationship? What if they were both homosexual and were in a relationship together to hide that? However, I don't like this theory as it still leaves way too many holes. Like if he was just going to his parents' house to come out to them, why was he giving his prized possessions away? Why was he sending messages to his roommate about what a great friend he had been to him? And of course, all the questions about wrecking his car and disappearing. All of that just puts some major holes in that theory. Another theory I have seen some speculation about is that Bryce could have possibly been meeting a drug dealer. Maybe to re-up on Vivance. Maybe he was sitting around for so long because he was waiting on his drug dealer to meet him. There are reports that Bryce said he was meeting a friend. It may seem insane to wait around that long for a drug dealer, but as somebody who has been through drug addiction myself, it is totally plausible that a drug addict would sit and wait for hours if that's what it took to get their fix, especially if they're having withdrawals. However, I don't really like this one either. Bryce was a popular college student. It shouldn't have been any trouble for him to score Vivance or similar drugs like Adderall from somebody on campus. Plenty of college students take uppers to help them stay awake and study. And of course, this one has just as many holes too. Why would he be giving away his prized possessions? A drug addict wouldn't give their stuff away, they would sell it for drug money. Now we'll get into the more likely theories. If Bryce is still out there somewhere, it's most likely he planned all of this from the beginning. I don't think he suffered trauma, and he's just wandering around aimlessly. If he is still out there, he had to have this whole thing planned out. Could he have been waiting for somebody to meet him? Is that why he sat around in Button Willow for around 18 hours? Was he trying to fake his own death and then get a ride with somebody and disappear forever? I don't find this to be the most likely theory, but I do think it holds some weight. It does seem odd to me that Bryce would try to commit suicide by driving his car off a cliff into a lake. That seems like kind of a rough way to go. You're probably going to be injured in the crash, and then you will drown, which sounds awful. Could it be possible that Bryce had some serious issues with his parents? Could he have been ignoring their calls because he didn't want to talk to them? The police did say he was very reluctant to talk to his mom on the phone. Christian literally had to follow behind him in his car just to get him out of Button Willow. Maybe his family life at home wasn't as great as the Laspisas make it seem. This brings me to 2 Reddit posts, both from deleted user accounts on Reddit. I have no idea if it's from the same person or not, and I have no way of contacting them. However, one podcast I was listening to while doing my research called "And Then They Were Gone" claimed to have contacted this Reddit user. This is where I heard about the first Reddit post for the first time. The podcasters claimed the deleted user account was called the Anonymous Hooligan. They said that they contacted the Anonymous Hooligan to try to verify what he was saying, and they said they couldn't disclose any information. But they said they were able to verify the Anonymous Hooligan was somebody that knew the Laspisa family in real life. I tried contacting the podcast through their email address a couple weeks ago, but never got a response back. I also tried contacting Sean and Kim on Facebook because I wanted to clarify a bunch of things with them and ask them what exactly it was about the way Bryce was acting that made them contact his parents, but they never responded either. Which isn't surprising. Here is the post from the Anonymous Hooligan.
This is the question that has me losing sleep. I've posted about this case in other threads, alluding to the fact that we aren't being given all the information. I'm also in the position of actually knowing this family and have been given the okay to share a lot more information. I'm not sure this is the best place, but it's a start. I guarantee that what I am about to share is going to be a bombshell to the narrative. It's been mentioned by someone previously that Bryce was given an ultimatum to stay off of drugs or be cut off from the family's financial support. I wholeheartedly believe that to be true and that it weighed heavily in Bryce's decision to leave Karen and Mike in the rearview mirror. He knew they would do so. Remember, he was busted in Chicago and convicted on an MDMA possession charge, prior to the family, -1 anyway, more on that below, moving to California. It was a major embarrassment to the family, or more specifically, Mike and Karen. In Bryce's freshman year, he was kicked out of the dorms at Sierra for partying-related issues. Remember, he was just 19 at the time of his disappearance. I'm not sure it's been mentioned as of yet, but the Laspisas, especially Karen, should be pressed about this fact, because there's not been a single mention made of it. How many people get kicked out of college dorms for partying? Must have been one hell of a rager. Because he was not allowed back at the dorms, he was forced to room with friends. The narrative states that Karen is the only one to have spoken with Bryce during this ordeal, and I believe that to be true. I also believe that Karen has not been forthcoming with Mike about the complete details of her conversations with Bryce throughout it. Why do I believe what I do? It's because I know one aspect of the model parents narrative to be 100% false, fabricated from whole cloth, most likely to save face to their friends and community, if not to indulge Karen's obsession with reality TV. What is it that they've been hiding? What secret am I privy to that will shed new light on the Laspisa family? Bryce Laspisa was not an only child. I repeat, Bryce Laspisa was not an only child. It has not been mentioned yet that Mike Laspisa has a child from a previous marriage, who is 5 years Bryce's elder, but there you have it. Bryce's stepsister lived with her mother until her untimely demise at the age of 13, and that is when she began to live permanently with Mike and Karen. To put it bluntly, Karen horribly abused her, and the resulting mental health challenges, PTSD among others, that arose from the abuse prompted Karen and Mike to kick her out of the home, cut her off financially, and ultimately abandon her at a time in her life when she needed it most. Tell me, folks, given this verifiable fact, does it really seem all so unlikely that Karen and Mike Laspisa's son would want nothing to do with them? He was battling addiction, probably meant to ask for help, before finally settling on destroying/giving away all property bestowed to him and offering a final fuck you by destroying the car, registered to them of course. I can provide all manner of proof to group mods privately if need be, to substantiate this information. The legacy of the Laspisa family appears to be that of abandoning loved ones in their greatest time of need, rather than be faced with their embarrassing failure as parents.
I can't find anything to corroborate that Bryce was arrested for MDMA possession and was on probation, or that Bryce had any kind of a sibling, or that Bryce's parents treated him poorly. That was posted on Reddit 4 years ago, in 2021, commenting on a different post about Bryce. Then later in my research, I came across a similar post. This one is from 7 years ago, in 2018.
Something of an insider here. I can say with certainty that there were issues between Bryce and his family. While Bryce's mother, Karen, is an unrepentant psycho, I am told that Bryce had a tight, borderline codependent relationship with her in the years leading up to his disappearance, but not much is known about their relationship in the final year or so. His relationship with his father, Mike, was at times very tumultuous, as Mike would lose his temper, yell, and scream at Bryce over things as trivial as not understanding how to complete his math homework. I don't know if the relationship was ever physically violent, but there was most definitely a lot of verbal/emotional abuse going on in that household, and not just with Bryce. The latter part of Bryce's teen years were marred by a few incidents, such as getting busted with MDMA, as well as a lot of underage drinking issues that have gone largely unreported, all of which served to soil his familial ties. As I understand, Bryce was well on his way to becoming a teenaged alcoholic. He was apparently known for taking booze to high school and spending some school days maintaining a desired level of intoxication. It's very safe to assume that this behavior continued to spiral out, evidenced by his taste for Adderall and other scripts, and he suffered a psychotic break from it, evidenced by his friends calling his mother with their concerns. It must have been some pretty disturbing behavior in order for kids, who all use drugs recreationally, to contact their friends' parents with concerns about his mental state. When Bryce left home to attend community college, he did not do so by his own motivation. Karen and Mike shopped around for what school he would attend, gave him no decision in the matter, and shipped him out when the school year began. The decision was in part based on the availability of dormitories, as they wanted Bryce out of the home as soon as possible, which seems in keeping of what I know to be true of their parenting. They sent him to Sierra College in Rocklin, California, which is a 460-mile drive from his parents' home in Laguna Niguel. Mike and Karen were both very controlling parents, the type that foster harsh, rebellious behavior from their kids. They sought to control every aspect of his life and used their money to do so. Bryce owned literally nothing of his own and was frequently reminded of it when he stepped out of line. To me, his actions were a great big fuck you to his manipulative, controlling, abusive parents. What better way to let them know you're done than by intentionally wrecking their car and leaving behind all the accoutrements they paid for with their money and leveraged as a means of control? The time he spent in that small rural town was most likely waiting on someone to give him a ride. I believe the big story he wanted to tell his family was that he would be dropping out of school and moving elsewhere. I believe he wanted to say it to their faces but chickened out and decided that he was just going to move on. I believe his family knows this and have used the media, his friends and so on to wage a pressure campaign against him. I believe the police have encountered him at some point and have respected a request for silence, thus leading them to their conclusion that he is voluntarily missing.
This post says similar things to the anonymous hooligan post. Could even be the same person. It talks about Bryce having a very tumultuous relationship with his parents, getting busted for MDMA, being an alcoholic in high school, and talks about his parents being very controlling and using their money to control him, including forcing him to go to Rockland Community College. I was browsing the comments, and this is when things got a little crazy. I saw a comment that said they thought his sister's initials were CW, and she was living in Georgia. I kept digging, and came across something that mentioned the name Christine. So I searched Christine Laspisa on Google. This took me to a LinkedIn profile of Christine Walker, who had long bright red hair and definitely had the appearance that she could be the sister of Bryce. She is married, so maybe she changed her name to Walker through marriage? So, I kept digging and found out that Christine Walker was from St. Charles, Illinois. That's basically one city over from Naperville. She also had a business listed under the name Christine Laspisa. I searched for Christine Walker on Facebook and came across the profile of a girl that looked very similar. However, her hair was much darker. I looked through her pictures and found the exact same picture that was on her LinkedIn profile. This is definitely the same girl. I found out she had married a guy named Walker, and her maiden name was Laspisa. Now we were getting somewhere. I started searching through her friends, and saw quite a few with the last name Laspisa. And then there it was. Michael Laspisa. Michael Laspisa was on her Facebook friends. Bryce's dad is Michael Laspisa. I looked at his info, and he had Christine Walker listed as his daughter. Holy shit. Did I just blow open this case? Wait a minute. I went to his profile, and I saw he was married to Marcia Laspisa, not Karen. Then I started looking at his pictures, and I realized it wasn't Bryce's dad. I pulled up Bryce's dad's Facebook account, and it was definitely two entirely different people, both named Michael Laspisa. Are you freaking kidding me? So, after all that, we're back to square one. She just happened to have the last name Laspisa. She had red hair. She was from the same area of Illinois as Bryce, and her father's name is Michael, the same as Bryce's. A huge fucking coincidence. So that's really all I can tell you about those two Reddit posts by users whose accounts are now deleted. Was it really from somebody who knew the Laspisas in real life? Maybe. It could really answer a lot of questions about the case, like why Bryce was sitting around stalling for so long, or why he didn't want to speak to his mom on the phone when the police were there. It also really would have given a lot of weight to the theory that Bryce left on purpose. That he was waiting for somebody to meet him, to take him away from his awful controlling parents. Maybe he wanted to make it look like he died, and that's why he gave his stuff away to Sean. Maybe he knew he would never see his friends again, and that's why he sent Sean that message and broke up with Kim. Maybe Bryce wasn't even headed to his parents' house. Maybe the whole plan all along was to fake his own death, and then hop in a car with some mysterious person, and be whisked away to start a new life. However, I don't believe this was an authentic post from someone who really knew the Laspisa family in real life. I think they came across Christine Walker aka Laspisa and fabricated this entire story. I think that the proof they showed, and when they were gone podcasters, was the profiles of Christine Walker. Christine Walker is 5 years older than Bryce, just as the original anonymous hooligan post stated. This has to be the same woman they're talking about alleging her to be his sister. But she can't be. Their father may share the same name, both have bright red hair, both are from the same area in Illinois, but her parents are not the same people as Bryce's parents. So personally I have doubt in these Reddit posters. However, if the anonymous hooligan, or the other poster whose account is deleted would like to email me with some actual proof, I would be happy to set the record straight. It seemed like it all fit together so perfectly there for a moment. But that wasn't the case. Christine Walker isn't Bryce's sister. I find it unlikely that Bryce ran away to start a new life, or that he's wandering around downtown LA, or somewhere living a transient existence. Bryce Laspisa is one of the most well-known true crime cases out there. Thousands of people know his face. I believe if he was out there still living his life, somebody would have recognized him and reported him by now. And for a guy that supposedly lived a very sheltered existence and was completely controlled by his parents, it would be extremely difficult for him to do everything necessary to create a new identity and start living a new life on his own. And that's going to bring us to the final theory. The one I believed happened. I think what likely happened is that Bryce intentionally ended his life while suffering from violence-induced psychosis. It's the only theory that explains basically everything. I believe Bryce was under a lot of stress and was somebody who had an addictive personality. There are a lot of comments on Reddit threads from people claiming to have known him in high school, talking about how he was a huge partier and did a lot of excessive drinking and drugs. This post on screen says some similar things to the other two posts I found earlier. Pause if you'd like to stop and read it. One of the side effects listed for the drug violence is psychosis. Psychosis is a mental health condition where there's a loss of contact with reality. It involves experiencing hallucinations and delusions. Psychosis can be a symptom of various mental illnesses like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and severe depression, or it can be triggered by substance abuse or trauma. I don't know if Bryce had any mental illnesses, but he was approaching the age when those types of illnesses began to show signs. Taking a drug like Vyvanse can speed that up and make things a lot worse. And even if he didn't have an underlying mental illness, Vyvanse can still cause psychosis, which could have caused him to become suicidal. Drug use alters your brain chemistry. It can make you have thoughts you wouldn't normally have. It can change your way of thinking. It can make you think that things are so bad the only solution is to end it all. When researching Vyvanse and its side effects, I came across a lot of testimonials from people who experienced major effects from taking the drug. I'm going to include a lot of screenshots of these testimonials, and I'm just going to put them in quickly to save time. So if you would like to stop and read them, just pause the video on each one. Some of them mentioned they had underlying mental health conditions like bipolar. Some of them also said Vyvanse made them so anxious and jittery, and I noticed a lot of people saying they would make sure to take breaks from it, like take it for 6 days, and then not take it for a day. They said if they didn't take a break from it, their anxiety would get really bad. I have never taken Vyvanse myself, but I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was 4. I took ADHD medication from age 4 to around age 14. I tried medications such as Ritalin, Dexedrine, and Concerta. I don't really remember how Ritalin affected me, as I was young when I was on that. I do remember I started taking Dexedrine when I was around the age of 8, and I wasn't on it for very long because it caused me to have episodes where I would go into a rage and destroy my room. I started taking Concerta after that and experienced emotional blunting. The way I described it was that I felt like a zombie. In elementary school, I was always the class clown type, and I was always laughing and joking around. When I started taking Concerta, it definitely helped me pay attention a lot better, but I just felt like I had no emotions at all. Bryce wasn't prescribed Vyvanse by a doctor, so it's really impossible to know just how much of the drug he was taking. If I had to guess, I would say it was probably a fairly high dose. He also probably wasn't sleeping regularly, because this drug is a stimulant. Sleep deprivation is another factor that could induce psychosis. So, if he was taking high doses of Vyvanse while drinking heavily and not sleeping regularly, that is a nasty cocktail that puts him at very high risk for developing psychosis. Bryce would not have been thinking clearly, and this could have caused him to have suicidal ideation. The way Bryce acted in the days before he left paints a picture of a person who was planning on ending their life. Giving away possessions, letting people close to him know how much they meant to him, ending his relationship. It's all things a suicidal person would do. The only thing I still wonder about is when he told his mom on the phone at Kim's apartment that he had a lot to talk to her about. Maybe he just wanted to talk to her to let her know how much he loved her. Maybe he was going to his parents' house to talk to them one last time. Maybe on the way there things just got so bad he couldn't go through with seeing his parents one last time. Bryce sat around in Buttonwillow for nearly a full day. Was he contemplating ending his life? Was he trying to gather the courage to do it? Was he coming up with a plan? For some reason he didn't seem to want to leave Buttonwillow, but eventually Christian made him. Then he drove a couple of hours away to Castaic. He called his mom and told her he was too tired to drive and was pulling over to take a nap. Just 16 minutes later, he was driving past the spot where he would crash his car. He drove around that area for about 2 hours. Then he went to the spot where there is a gap in the guardrail and drove off the cliff down the embankment. It was likely very dark in that area at that time, and from Lake Hughes Road it looks as if the lake is at the bottom of that embankment. Bryce likely didn't realize there was another road at the bottom, and the lake was further out. Bryce was trying to drive his car into that lake. He didn't try to brake when he was going down the embankment. Instead, he accelerated. He likely thought he would die in the crash or possibly drown inside his car. Once he got to the bottom, he kicked out the rear window and climbed out. He left all his stuff behind, his phone, his laptop, his wallet, his bag. He didn't need it anymore. I think he then walked to the truck stop, and from there he went to another location and ended his life. You think they would have been able to come up with some surveillance footage of him walking around the area where the truck stop was? It looks like a fairly populated area. I don't think Bryce is in Castaic Lake, though it is possible he could be somewhere nearby. That state recreation area is 4,224 acres. He could have died somewhere deep in the forest off any of the hiking trails. Animals could have scattered his remains or leaves could have fallen over them. They have searched the lake multiple times thoroughly. The lake is 3.5 square miles and has around 29 miles of shoreline. It's over 300 feet deep in some areas. If he had gone in the lake, his body would have sunk to the bottom. Then bacteria would grow in the body as it decomposes. Gases produced by this process would fill the abdominal cavity and cause his body to float to the surface. It's possible the body could have stayed on the floor of the lake, but only if it was cold enough, and being in California, I don't think it was cold enough for that to happen. Sadly, I think this is just another case of drug abuse taking another life. Doing drugs like Vyvanse without a doctor's prescription can be dangerous. As I mentioned in my previous video, I was a heroin addict throughout my 20s, and now I have 8 years clean, and I work as a peer support specialist. I deal with many different types of clients ranging from substance abuse to extreme mental health disorders to suicidal ideation. I have seen the damage drugs can do to someone's mind. They can take a nice, well-liked, happy guy like Bryce and make the world appear very dark and full of horror. It's happened to me before. I have been very close to taking my life before because I was addicted to drugs and suffering from extreme anxiety, and I didn't think there would ever be an end. I think if we can take anything away from this that's beneficial, it's that when you're going through this kind of thing, the best thing to do is to seek help. I know it can be scary. You don't know what the consequences will be. I know I've personally had worries about going to the hospital because I didn't want to be stuck in some hospital room suffering from anxiety attacks. But when you're abusing drugs, your brain chemistry is altered. You aren't thinking clearly. The best thing you can do is seek help from someone who is. But you never know. Bryce could still be out there somewhere. This is the number to call to report any tips or information. If you've seen somebody that looks like Bryce, go ahead and report it. Remember, this was 12 years ago. Bryce would be 31 years old now in 2025. If he is living a transient life, he may have long hair and a beard. He may be very worn down looking. He might not look the same as the guy in all these pictures. I think this case will ultimately end up like the Brandon Lawson case. One day I think somebody is going to stumble across his remains somewhere near Castaic, and this thing will be solved. But until that happens, we can only keep looking and hoping Bryce is still out there somewhere, so he can reunite with his family. Or not, if he doesn't want to. So that's going to wrap up this video. Thank you to everyone who has made it this far. I appreciate you. I plan to keep making more true crime videos, but I am very lazy, and I work a full-time job, so it's a bit difficult for me to make time to get work done on my videos. It definitely helps motivate me when I go to look at my video and see thousands of views and hundreds of positive comments. My last video didn't seem to get much traction for a while, and then out of nowhere the views just started shooting up for a while. That gave me the motivation to make another one. So if you like what I'm doing and want to see more of these videos, please like the video, subscribe to my channel, and share it with your friends. I expect the more of these I make, the better at it I will get. I know my editing still sucks at this point, but I am just kind of figuring all this out on my own. I haven't had any training or education or anything like that. I barely graduated high school. So if you have any constructive criticism or tips on how I can improve my videos, please share it in the comment section. Thanks again, everyone, and I look forward to reading all your comments and seeing what you all have to say about this case. Hopefully we can create a great community on this channel And if we're able to help solve any cold cases, that would be awesome. Bryce has now been missing for 12 years. His family passes out these cards that inform people of his missing status and ask them to perform a random act of kindness in his honor. If you know someone that you think could be Bryce Laspisa, call this phone number on the screen, especially if you live on the West Coast. If he is still out there, he likely looks quite a bit different from the pictures we have of him from 2013, especially if he's been living on the streets. He does have a large tattoo of a bull's head with Roman numerals in the middle on his left shoulder. His family and friends deserve closure. The more exposure this case gets, the better chances we have of making that happen. This concludes the story of the disappearance of Bryce Laspisa.